really appreciate all the things that Dave does, or how popular you are when you're the gun show chairman. Until I actually got to see Dave working and, trying to plan that big map out and put everybody by their best friend and make them happy, and they're close to their door or close to the bathroom or whatever they want. All the cancellations, all the reservations trickling in, even, a few days before the show.
Even the day of the show.
The day of.
Oh, the day of the show, yes. Go up to Dave and tell him how much you appreciate the job he's done, because he's really done a lot of work. And Chris is going to take over, and we're all going to try and help make him successful, because it's in the best interest of our club. But I know Chris has got a lot of work to do, and we're all going to try to help him. Now on Sunday, Dave said he didn't want anything to show our appreciation, but we'd already ordered it and it's already here. So Dave, would you come up here anyway? This is a small token of appreciation. I was going to get you an Evans rifle, but Cindy said no. Just says, with much appreciation, much, to Dave Weddle, CGCA Show Chairman, 2017 to 2026.
Thank you very much.
And we're going to take a picture, Dave.
So, as I said, I bought something that I'm having a hard time connecting to John Browning, but I've always wanted one of these. And Aaron had a nice one on his table. It's a Walther. It's the French manufactured post-war. Very, very nicely blued and hardly anywhere. Just a little tiny bit of muzzle wear on it. And I've always thought they were very elegant guns, and so I wanted one. So then I'm trying to figure out, now how am I going to explain to my wife the John Browning connection? And then it just popped into my mind, well, hell, it's a 32 ACP. He invented the 32 ACP, along with the 25, the 380, the 45, the 30-06. I'm in trouble.
Basically, what we have here is an eagle head sword. If you're not familiar with eagle heads, they were made from 1783 to about the 1840s. They were considered the original American sword. This is what the officers carried through the War of 1812, and a lot of them carried them into the Mexican War. I bought this particular one for two reasons. It is infantry. When you see a straight blade on these, that usually indicates it was an infantry usage. Now, if you get into the 1840s, it'll be about 2/3 this width of a blade. So in the early years, they actually were planning on using them. They made them where they could actually fight with them. As they went along, it became more kind of a ornate dress type thing. It's a horn handle on this one. It's an early eagle head. As you go along, this gets a little shorter. If you look at the actual head, they've got the feathers in the brass where they did it. A lot of these are made by a guy by the name of Turkle, but the black horn handle indicates this is a guy that didn't have quite as much money as the rest of them. This was kind of considered the beginning sword, then they went into horn, ivory, pearl, other different substances on the handles. But this one was actually made to be more or less in combat. Yes.
Was it made in England or America?
Actually, the blades, they were assembled in America, is the best way to put it.
Made in England.
Yeah, a lot of them are made in England. Birmingham made a ton of them. They probably made this one.
Yeah.
As far as that goes. Designs, they'd come over. The blades in particular were all European. I've got another one at home, which is kind of an interesting one. It's made by a company which was a merger between an American British sword blade, and American was doing the top of it. Somehow that company broke up in 1812. So,
Imagine that.
there were little stresses here and there in the relationships. This is one I got, which really is kind of an historical sword. This particular one, it's a Walloon broadsword. Now the Walloons were your southern Belgian, your Flemish were your northern Belgians. But essentially, this style originated primarily with the Germans and the Netherlands. And then when the Netherlands was conquered by the French, a lot of these blazes filtered down and around, and they got into a little wider usage. The primary innovation of this sword was, prior to this, swords were probably either a cutter, in other words, they were slashing or hacking down with them, or they were a thrust weapon like a rapier, where they were just basically trying to stick into pinpoints, different places. This one can do both. Got into a lot of different kinds of broadswords. They got what they call a walloon, they have a mortuary, you're getting into your Scottish basket hilts, your Venetians, I won't even try to pronounce that, it starts with an S. But very historical sword, very innovative for its time, and I was really happy to add one to my collection.
The first one is a model 1871 U.S. Ward Burton carbine. And this was the third, I think, so far as I know, this was the third bolt-action rifle that was purchased by the U.S. military. This one was the U.S. military was having trials after the end of the Civil War for a new rifle. They wound up going with the trapdoor, which much to Custer's chagrin. This was one of the ones that was in the hunt in the Terry trials. And the problem they had with it was it's a bolt-action rifle, and none of their soldiers were used to a rifle without an exposed hammer. Okay, this one, like most bolt-action rifles, is striker fired, and so they had a lot of accidental discharges with, the resulting consequences, and so they didn't like it. They were scared of it, and they had a hard time with it. But the U.S. military bought 316 of these, so this is one of 316 of these rifles that was made, and it was issued to cavalry troops out in the West. And this one, interestingly, was actually carried by a cavalry soldier, as evidenced by the swivel sling wear on the stock. Okay, because what they would do is they would have a belt going across their chest diagonally, and they would clip, this roller would run along that belt up and down, and they would clip their rifle to it, and you can see how it would rub against the stock and create that impression. And so when they're riding, the roller would roll down and it would hang right here, and then they would have the muzzle of the gun in a leather boot that was attached to the saddle. The first one is an Allen and wheel lock, and they made these in percussion. That's why it's not tied, it's percussion. They also made it in a lip fire, both of which was to avoid violating Smith & Wesson's patent on the bored-through cylinder. And my book by Peter Schiffers on where he evaluates different Civil War handguns. Great book if you're into Civil War. Those books he did one on carbines too. And he test fires them and rates them in terms of what he thinks were the best ones. He rates this one number 2 after the Remington New Model Army. This one, there's a little latch here that releases the trigger guard, and this is your rammer for packing your cartridge into the cylinder. And then there's this latch here, which you push up to pull out the cylinder pin, so you can remove the cylinder if you have it on half cock, which I don't. This one is a Bacon, and it's they only made. What was it? Yeah, it was just over, I think it was like 365 of these. And this is the first revolver to have a swing out cylinder. So that caught my eye because I love, the first one to do this, the first one to do that. This is before Colt, before Smith & Wesson had a swing out cylinder. Bacon had that feature. And it's just a latch here on the front that you push in to release it. And So anyway, it's it's called a Navy model. It's in 38 caliber, and used a 38 rimfire. And why did they not make so very many of them? Well, I think they got a cease and desist letter, had a lawsuit with Smith & Wesson over the Roland White patent, and so they didn't make very many of them and went to a percussion gun. And then, last but not least, I'm a Merwin Hobart collector, and I didn't get a Merwin Hobart, but I did get a Merwin and Bray. Okay, this is a Merwin and Bray first model, Army model, and this was in 40 caliber cup fire. And the cup fire cartridge, if you look at it just in profile, it looks like it looks like just a cylinder. It's just flat. But when you look at the end, there's a cup, and the primer would be down in that cup, and you would load it from the front of the cylinder, and then the hammer would go through a smaller hole in the back and catch that, go into the cup and ignite the cartridge. And that was to circumvent the Roland White patent. So they go, oh, we're going to be really clever. We're going to come up with a new kind of cartridge that loads in a cylinder from the front, and in that way we will not violate the Roland White patent and get sued by Smith & Wesson. Okay, unfortunately, they copied Smith & Wesson's hinged frame and the latch, so they could take the cylinder out. So you'd put your cup fire cartridge in from the front, and then you'd fire your rounds, and then you could push it out. Well, they avoided the Roland White patent, but they violated Smith & Wesson's patent on that latch, and therefore I think they got a cease and desist letter. Okay, we don't have records of this happening, but they only made 100 of these. It's a brass frame, silver plated. They made 100 that way, and they made 150 in iron frame, silver plated. So this is the more rare of the two. And on the top, they have their patent date, but on the cylinder, they have the date of the Roland White patent. After they got the cease and desist letter, they had to turn them over to Smith & Wesson, and they stamped it with their patent date and sold it.
So I brought what's called a CZ82. The technical term is VZ82, but I guess there's a VZ82 rifle, so a lot of people designate this the CZ82. I found this one pretty interesting. I didn't even know about this firearm until Friday, where a guy had a bucket of them, and so they were really cheap. But when I did a lot of research, I thought it was pretty interesting. For one, I think this might be the newest CNR that's technically on the list. That's not like a commemorative weapon. You know, sometimes the commemorative weapons get put on the CNR list, right? This was started manufacture in 1982, right near the end of the Soviet Union. But because of that, and because Czechoslovakia, as that form, doesn't exist anymore, it somehow was able to get on the CNR list. So they made like 200,000 of these. They're great shooters. They're basically a modern gun, but it's still on the CNR list. So I thought that was pretty interesting. A couple things, as Scott was saying, first, one of the things that this little pistol has that most don't is it's got an ambidextrous safety and mag release. So this is the first gun ever that had both at the same time. So you can release the mag on either side there, which I thought was pretty interesting. The coating, it looks pretty horrible, but a lot of them are that way because it wasn't blued or parkerized or anything. It was just painted, and that's how it came out of the factory. So it's serialized on the barrel and the frame, but because they painted it and that serial is right on the frame, that's right where they started chipping. So almost every single one of these you find that saw any use whatsoever are all chipped up right here. So this is like pretty standard look to these pistols. Pretty ugly, honestly, but that's kind of what I like. I like these ugly guns, right? That's kind of what interests me. The other thing that I didn't even know about until I started researching this was a polygonal barrel. I don't know if anyone's heard of that before. Yeah, so I guess maybe that was just me. Maybe that's where my age shows, but the barrel looks almost smooth, and I didn't realize that. I guess the Glocks use a form of a polygonal barrel, so you typically have those what do they call them? The grooves and lands and grooves, right? And I did a lot of research. The Glocks basically still have the lands, but the grooves are rounded out. If you look at this, there's no lands either. It's literally just kind of like rolling completely. So if you look down here, you can't really tell there's any rifling whatsoever. And my understanding is the reason they did that was when they were designing this weapon, they wanted to use your standard 9mm, but they got pressure from the Soviet Union not to use a NATO round, so they went to a 9mm Makarov, but they didn't use a standard 9mm Makarov. It was a proprietary 9mm Makarov that if they used that ammo, a typical rifled barrel would get shot out so quick. Well, they stopped making that ammo, but typical 9mm Makarov still shoots great through this gun. So that's why they went with a polygonal barrel over that. They did come out with a civilian version called the CZ or VZ 83, and that one was in more common cartridges. I think you can get that one at 380, but that one doesn't qualify for CNR. But the VZ 82, because it was a military weapon, does qualify for CNR. So.
You just don't want to mess with me though. That's a 6-shot double action revolver, and when you're out of ammo, you can poke them. This one is French made in 1884. They first started making these concealable cane guns in 1814 is when they started first making them. And they started making them in the U.S. in about 1855. So, yeah, just kind of a fun little thing to have, just in case, you know, if that don't work, you can poke them or shoot them. Either way.
Is that a rimfire?
Yes, 22 short rimfire.
How's the disconnect? Like, how would you? Is it just a twist or?
Yep, quarter twist. Your
Trigger.
trigger falls right out, and you're ready to pull and let it go. And it's double action.
Felt kind of funny bringing this out because I actually got this at the show Sunday from a guy who bought it from another guy that belongs to the club. So maybe all of you have seen this at least once, and the guy in the club that owned it before the guy I bought it from owned it. They've had it here prior. This is basically a Revolutionary War colonial period, what's called a hanger. You can see it's kind of a short sword and has most of the leather scabbard here. It's pretty common to have the brass or metal drag missing, a little more weight. Those came off pretty frequently. This is kind of unique. It's set up with rings for an officer's belt. It also has a little button here to put it in the frog for the baldric, go over the shoulder. When you have leather scabbards, you get really paranoid of these things breaking. So if you're going to take it apart, you want to hold that scabbard straight up. Then when you lay it down, use both hands. You don't want to pull it out this way. The weight can cause that to break. This has a pretty good little break started. Somebody kind of stitched the back of this a little bit with some, you can see there, the white stitching. The other good way to do it is lay it down on the table to pull it out. You can see the blade. This is pretty typical of the colonial period. This may be getting a little later into the war. A little short to be, has a good curve like an artillery sword, but a little short. Probably a hanger, probably used by the infantry. Again, the guy that owned this, I'll pick on Tom back there. He probably didn't have the money to buy something fancy. This looks like a black bone handle also.
So last year at our gun show, I brought my first Colt handgun. This year I went back to the same gentleman that sold me that, and he had these two. And I couldn't decide which one I liked.
Are you still trying to figure it out?
I am. I'm still trying to figure it out. I think I like them both, but he said that he thought that I should have them both. So he made me a great deal on them. So these are both Colt's first revolvers. They are both open top. The one that I had last year had the gold wash on the cylinder. And this one I don't think had any gold wash on it ever. But it's also pretty nicely engraved. And you can read the Colts Manufacturing, Hartford, Connecticut on the top. And I think they make a pretty nice little set.
I got it at our show. I was going to say the first Smith I've bought in a while, but it's not. But most of my 22s are Colts. I do have a handful of Smiths, but I've always wanted the revolver. And the real designation is the Smith & Wesson Model 17 K22. And it was called the K22 Masterpiece. Prior to that, it was the Outdoorsman. It's, there's a lot of them out there. The gun is in exceptional shape, has Jarvis's blessing, which meant the world to me. Now, the funny part of the story, working the show, and I was clearing the back by the southwest exit, needed to go to the front. I don't know if Cindy paged me or I had to work the door, whatever. So whenever I went one end of the show to the other, I always picked a different aisle to walk just to look. And I hadn't made it to the second half of the show yet. So I was just walking down an aisle and I saw this gun in a glass case and there was nobody there. And I looked at the gun, looked up what the aisle was. I came back and I thought, now I'm going to go find that gun. I walked for an hour and a half, did not find that gun. And I wasn't convinced that they sold it because the way it was in that case, you couldn't hardly see it. So and Jarvis came out, I told Jarvis about it, and he's like, really, it's that night? We got to find that. So Jarvis walked with me, couldn't find it. Anyway, I found it, went back Sunday morning. People were just uncovering, and I'm standing there waiting on them, and I bought it. So, but anyway, it's in great shape, and so.
Brand new.
So this is a engraved 38 Super, and I bought this 28 years ago. And then Poulin had an auction in February, and they had this gun, which looks like its long lost brother, and except this is 45 and this is a 38. And so I convinced myself I had to have this gun.
I bet that was hard.
And well, writing the check was the hard part. But they said they'd deliver it to me and save me on taxes and the shipping.
Insurance.
Yeah. So anyway, I received it at our show. So technically, it fits in our show and tell.
Yeah.
But if you look at these two guns, the engraving is pretty close. This gun, the one I bought at that Poulin auction and I received at our show, was made in 27. The Super was made in 34. But the engraving is very similar. The Super has the front strap checkered, which was an extra $3 or something back then. But anyway, they're very similar, and they're kind of like a match pair. And so I thought, I like even numbers.
Why
So
not?
so it's
Why not? See? Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
I rest my case.